Welcome to Overcaffeinated and Out of Effs, the podcast for burned out, career-minded moms who are ready to stop pretending everything's fine and feel like themselves again. I'm your host, Suzzie Vehrs, burnout coach for moms, licensed therapist, and mom of two. And I'm here to help you reclaim your energy, your identity, and your peace of mind. Whether you're lying awake thinking about the 87 things you didn't get done, or silently resenting the people you love most, this is your space to feel seen, supported, and not so alone. So grab your coffee, hot, cold, or day old, and let's get into it. Hey everybody, it's Christy. Welcome to Overcaffeinated and Out of Effs. In today's episode, I'd like to welcome our guest, Suzzie Vehrs. Suzzie's journey into birth work began with a deep calling to support women during one of life's most powerful and vulnerable moments, birth. Her passion grew after witnessing how compassionate care and informed choices can completely transform a family's birth experience. After her own eye-opening experience with childbirth, one that left her both amazed and aware of how much families need emotional and physical support, Suzzie decided to become a doula. She trained extensively in birth and postpartum support, determined to ensure that no parent ever feels alone, unheard, or disempowered during their transition into parenthood. Today, Suzzie serves as a grounding presence in the birth space, helping families trust their instincts, navigate medical systems with confidence, and embrace the profound beauty of their own strength. Whether she's guiding first-time parents or supporting someone healing from a previous birth trauma, Suzzie's approach is rooted in empathy, advocacy, and calm reassurance. Her mission is simple but powerful, to remind families that birth is not just a medical event, it's a human, emotional, and spiritual journey. So, I have invited Suzzie here today to share a bit about her own story, as a mom, as a doula, and a business owner. And also, we're just going to have a conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about this idea that you can do anything, but you can't do everything. So, Suzzie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. That was such a beautiful intro. I really appreciate that.
Yes, of course. Well, and I'm wondering, if you wouldn't mind just starting off by telling us, a little bit more about yourself, your journey into motherhood, and, really how that shaped the work that you do today.
Yeah, well, I started my life. I studied economics and I started my career in finance. When I had my first daughter, I had this kind of a challenging question almost every woman has to answer. Am I going to stay home or am I going to go back to work? And at the time, I chose to stay home because I couldn't. One, I didn't want to do like that 50, 60 hours demanding career, but also we were moving for my then husband's job. And so it was this beautiful window that made sense. Like, let's try staying home. Turned out I did not love staying home. And so I nannied a little bit. I tried to find jobs that I could do pseudo staying home. And then eventually, after I had my second daughter, I just had the best birth experience with her. And my doula and my midwife made such an impact on me. I was like, okay, this is what I need to spend the rest of my life doing. I felt this really strong pull, almost like a call into the birth work. And so when Hazel was about 6 months, I went and did my certification to become a doula. And I started doing that. Shortly thereafter, I also pursued a divorce and then became like a breadwinner for my family, which took a whole different level of responsibility.
Oh, I'm sure.
And so for me, myself, I feel like I felt all the emotions of like, that difficult decision. Do I return to work or not? How? And then working, taking on probably too much in that era of, both in the era when I tried to make jobs work with motherhood that were like, like nannying is a real job, but also so is parenting. And I feel like it was like crazy, wild thing to think, oh, you can just do them both, like you're a stay-at-home parent and not give yourself credit for it, all that work you're doing. And then like stepping into running a business and having this really centered, soul-fulfilling work, but also is very time-consuming. So that's my journey into motherhood, work, I've faced many moments of burnout and renewal in that process.
Yes, yes, and I love the point that you make too, just this idea that, this is not a black and white thing. When we're talking about, working parents, working moms, I mean, really all moms are working moms. Like, we know
Yes.
this, whether you're working at home or working outside of the home, and there's just a whole continuum of, like, everywhere in between the extremes of what that can look
Mhm.
like. Um, but you mentioned, once you became a doula, when you did start to go to work outside of the home, you started to have these kinds of experiences where it just, at times it was too much. And so I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about that. Like, how did things really kind of change for you in that sense once you did start to go back to work outside?
Yeah, I mean, at that point in my life, because my divorce came so soon after, there was also this huge responsibility of, like, I had to pay bills, right? Like, I had rent to pay, I had to pay for food, I had to pay business expenses, I had to pay for childcare. And I think that is, a reality that every mom is facing is like, I remember at some points when like when you start a new job, it's not like you are automatically successful. And I certainly wasn't. Like when I would try to find clients, it was really hard and there was a lot of rejection. At that same time, it was kind of like we entered the COVID era where
Mhm.
a lot of people had, if you were exposed, you had to quarantine for a long time. So I was hungry for experience, and there were a lot of doulas that had contracts that they couldn't fill. And I was like, hands up, I'll go for you. And so I did a lot of backup work. But at that time, I would maybe get paid like $35, $40 an hour to be, this backup. But then I turn around and have to pay my babysitter like $25
Mm.
an hour. And I remember thinking like, okay, like this is not the salary I'm used
Yeah.
to, but it was worth it to build the business that I wanted. And so sometimes in that it was just a matter of powering through. Sometimes I spend a lot of time in meditation, a lot of time in stillness, a lot of time in like building that faith that this is all going to be worth it. Because a lot of times the numbers did not work out.
Mhm.
But I had faith that if I continued on the path, they would work out.
Okay.
And I had to, like, to me, it was like I had to build that strategy of how, it's clearly not working right now, but how is
Mhm.
it going to work out in the next year, the next 2 years, the next 3 years? And really, like, in those moments of doubt and those moments of like, I don't think I can do this again. And that time when you're like crying in the car and then coming back and like getting calm with the breath, thinking about the vision, thinking about the future, reconnecting to the purpose and the mission and the dreams I had for myself, for my girls, for the families I worked with, and it worked out. So
Yeah, that's
yeah.
wonderful. Well, and it sounds like, you really just had this mentality of, you had the expectation that it's hard at the beginning and you trusted that it was going to get better and you trusted that it was going to be easier. And even though it was difficult, you also knew that it was temporary and that if as long as
Mhm.
you kept working towards it, it would eventually get better. And so you said you just kind of like powered through until you really got to that point. Um, and it sounds like since then things have been very different for you. I'm wondering, like, as a
Yeah.
mom and a business owner, like, what does life look for you now today?
Oh my God, every day is so different in my life because I work with moms from before their birth. We're like prepping for their birth. I attend their birth with them, which can be anywhere from 15 hours to the longest birth I attended this year was like started on Monday and ended on Friday, and I was
Oh my
in and
gosh.
out for but I probably spent over 50 hours with them total.
Hmm.
And then right now I do about 24 hours of care postpartum, not continuously. It's 4-hour shifts, 6 visits, anytime in the first 6 months. Some families use that right at the beginning. Some families use it when they go back to work themselves, helping families set up their systems and figure out how to work together. And like, honestly, just like having a baby is so exhausting. Mothers deserve sleep. So sometimes it's like, they've been up all night, and with a fussy baby or a baby that just like the reality is babies have to eat at night and they like to wake up
Mhm.
at night and eat. And so you
Mhm.
have to catch up on your sleep. So sometimes that means like, you hand me the baby in the morning and you go sleep for 4 hours and I take care of everything around the house. And, me and the baby meal prep and we go for a walk and we take the dog out and we do some of those things that take the to-dos off a mother's plate so she can,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, that sounds amazing, because I think about, to your point, like how challenging it is for new moms. And you're absolutely right. I mean, it's just babies don't have the great don't have the greatest sleep. It is so broken and they do have to eat and they're just being babies. They're just being newborn. It's like normal, but yeah,
Yes.
but it's well, that doesn't mean that it's not really, really hard. So that's amazing that you are
Yeah.
able to help them with that and offer that support. Um, so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, you had brought to me that you were hoping that we could chat about this idea of you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And that is something that I often say to people as well. I imagine you also
Mhm.
find yourself saying that a lot. Um, and I'm sure when people hear that, they have their own idea of what that maybe means, what that maybe looks like. But I'm curious, how do you explain it to people? Like, what does that idea of you can do anything, but you can't do everything? Like, what does that mean and look like to you?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of moms have expectations to do everything perfectly at home and then do everything perfectly in their career as if they didn't have a baby. You work as if you didn't have a family, and you family as if you didn't have a job, and you kind of hold both those expectations of yourself, right? Like you expect that as one person, you can do it all.
Mhm.
Um, my daughter is a competitive gymnast. She's kind of wrapping up her last season. She's kind of done with it, but she went to nationals a couple years ago. It was so exciting. For a
Amazing.
while, it was like this thing that lit her up. And we read the Jordan Childs books together. And Jordan Child says in this book this thing that like really stuck with me, that as women, we're expected to do hard things and make it look easy. And if we don't make it look easy, we didn't do the hard thing good enough. And I think that is, like, so true in motherhood too, where, like, we're doing such hard things, it's okay to acknowledge, like, "Hey, this is hard, and we're not supposed to do it all on our own." Like, that is not the ultimate design of this whole thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a really interesting, way to talk about it because yes, I do think that a lot of moms do feel this immense pressure to not just to do all the things, but to make it look a certain way, right? And that's interesting that you're
Yeah.
saying that, if it doesn't look easy, like that word easy, I mean, is anything really easy as a parent?
Right,
I don't
right,
know.
right.
And so I'm curious, like, again, this phrase, this saying, it sounds simple and it sounds pretty straightforward, but what are your thoughts about, why moms have such a hard time actually living by it?
Yeah. Well, if you've been, like, a corporate girly, I love corporate girlies, I was a corporate girly at one point. Your worth is measured on your productivity, right? And
Mhm.
parenting is not like that. Like, imagine like a napped, trapped mom. You have this newborn that will only sleep if they're on your chest. Well, you decide to let them sleep on your chest and you feel like you're doing nothing. But a baby who gets 2 hours of skin to skin every day throughout the first month, their brain at 1 month is like gigantic. And their
Mhm.
learning capacity, even 5 years later when they're going to kindergarten, that still has an impact. But nobody is walking around saying, like, hey, nap trap mom, you're doing so great. Let's bring you some sushi and celebrate what you're doing. And here's your award and your bonus and all these things, right? Because it is the epitome of not looking productive when you are doing something incredibly productive. And I
Mhm.
think because we're so conditioned to look for those outside rewards, to again, like I think a lot of it comes back to a lot of the new moms I work with, and I went through this too, so it's just a reality, is that so often we're performing instead of instead of something coming from within.
Mhm.
And I think that in motherhood, when all of a sudden we have we take on this new identity and we take on this new set of expectations, and we're trying to keep our old identity and we're trying to keep our old expectations, that it becomes like you have to choose which ones you want to do. And you can get
Mhm.
help for the things that you aren't going to put on your plate, because there
Mhm.
are a lot of balls that cannot drop with all the responsibility that I know most working moms hold, because you do hold that responsibility in both places. And it's a tricky thing trying to figure out which things you can safely hand off and which things are okay to hand off, and which things like you yourself have to do. And I think that brings a lot of people to, I know it brought me to like, so many
Mhm.
days of tears trying to work through this.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and then I'm wondering, so then in your experience, supporting these families, where do you see moms a lot of times putting, unrealistic pressure on themselves during pregnancy, during the postpartum period, and beyond?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it depends. Like, I live in Seattle, so we're like a really big city. We're very diverse. We have a lot of different cultures. Culturally, there are a lot of, um, like pretty much any Eastern culture has the philosophy that a mom should have a period of 30 days where she's resting, and like literally the family does everything for her. Like her job is to bond with her baby and connect and figure out feeding. But like the meals, the cooking, the cleaning, the household duties, like a mom is not supposed to even think about that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I think in the more Western families, that the expectation is day one you get home and your house is clean, your dog is, you're the one walking the dog, you're the one cooking the food. Um, the idea that you need to have a period of rest and recovery is a lot harder. And I
Mhm.
even get it sometimes from mothers. Like, I have a family yesterday that I was going to do a postpartum shift, and I sent my little confirmation, like, "Hey, I'm heading your way soon. Do you need me to pick anything up on the way?" Yada, yada, yada. And she texted back and she's like, "Oh my God, the baby was so fussy last night. I feel so bad because my house is a mess and I can't have you
Oh.
over." And I was like, "Wait, wait, wait, wait. No, 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 no. This is what a postpartum doula does. Like, you're describing my job description. Your job is to hand a fussy baby over to, like, you were up literally all night and sleep is this fundamental need. It's okay for you to go take a rest and for things to be messy and for someone else to be the one to unmessify it for you for a day. Like, that is okay."
Yes.
And I don't think that's like, it doesn't come naturally to people who, to those of us, I was definitely in that category for a long time, who feel like our worth is defined by having it all together.
Yes. Yeah, no, and to your point, there can often be this expectation to just to bounce back, I mean, I feel like we see that even just with our maternity leaves and the fact that for so many people, they're really very short, in our country,
Yes,
maybe you got 12 weeks. I mean, I know that's the number that I think a lot of people sort of talk about, but realistically, a lot of people get less than that. Even the people who get more than that don't necessarily get a lot more than that, And
right.
so, yeah, just this expectation. And I do agree with you that I think a lot of this is conditioning. I think a lot of this is what we are observing, what we're seeing, what we're learning. Social media, you see celebrities and whatnot after having babies
Yeah.
looking so amazing. And it sets these like really unrealistic expectations for a lot of people. And so, I'm wondering like this expectation to, bounce back. How do you personally see this affecting new moms?
Well, I think that when you talk about the social media, I think that we are comparing ourselves to people who have an immense amount of support and who don't talk about the support. For example, here in Seattle, a lot of families have incredible fertility benefits. Like some of the companies here, when you have a baby, you can have in home care every single day for 6 weeks, meaning
Wow.
you can have somebody come sometimes up to 12 hours a day in your home to be there to help take care of whatever. That's very different than somebody who is like 3 weeks and back to work.
Mhm.
So, like, one, if you don't have a baby yet and you're thinking about a baby, look at your company's fertility benefits. And if they're not good, go get a job at a company that has really good fertility benefits. Like,
Mhm.
it's have the time, like choose to work at a company that has that. Because, like if you can spend $20,000 of someone else's money having in-home support every single day, I'm not the right doula for that because I don't do like daily support, but there are doulas who do, right?
Mhm.
Like choose that in your path if you can pre-plan it. And then if you are home and you're like, wow, my house is a mess. Like these routines are hard to set up. I'm struggling figuring it out. And then you're scrolling social media and you see someone all glam and pretty and
Mhm.
like, you know what? They probably have someone doing everything for them. Everything.
Mhm.
And that's
Mhm.
okay because it is their job to be glam and pretty and to show up with that energy. But remember, that's their job and
Mhm.
they're not doing everything else. Yeah, they might. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, and they don't just wake up and appear on camera like that either. Like, there's a lot of
Mhm.
effort that goes into presenting themselves like that. And to your point, we only have, so much time, so much energy, so much, you know, space to really be able to take care of any of the things we're going to take care of. So if we're investing our time and energy into making ourselves look a certain way, to present ourselves a certain
Yeah.
way, then yeah, then it sort of raises the question of what other help and support are they getting for the other things that need to be done?
Mhm. Yeah, and it also raises the question, like, when you're thinking about your own life, like, what are your priorities? Like, if you feel better when your house is clean, how can that get done? Like, does that mean that you're going to do it, or does that mean that someone else is going to do it? And if you're the one doing it, then what are you giving up for that, right? Like, self self-care is essential. Is that sleep you're giving up? Is that a nutritious meal you're giving up? Is it money and time because you're not working that you're giving up? And based on that, you might come up with a different solution than you doing it, or you might have different conversations with your partner about whose responsibilities, like how are we splitting this workload? Because I think that because I work with a lot of families,
Mhm,
like women carry a lot of the mental load, but I
mhm,
also think that part of that is that we're not willing to give it up. That
mhm,
we're not willing for things to be done differently. And it's true. If you are with a person that will not do their part, that needs to be addressed too.
mhm.
But if it's like a self inward, like my expectations are here because I have set these unrealistic expectations, then like that's a problem that you can work out. And, like my therapist helped me so much with that. Like I would just so highly recommend, like, I'm not saying like, that's a you problem. I'm not saying it like
Yeah,
that, but I
yeah.
am saying that, like, if you go to a therapist and get help and understand these expectations, then you're able to take some of these expectations off of yourself and have a more realistic attitude that is so much easier to move through life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I actually, so I am a therapist and I have talked to, I've had a lot of sessions with moms and whatnot. And I have to say, like, this is something that I hear over and over and over again. And I do talk to them about the same idea because, yes, there can be the problem, of course, or the issue, of course, of like, what sort of help and support are we getting? Are we not getting? What does that look like? How can we delegate? All of those sorts of things. But on top of that, so many moms really struggle with this idea of, like, giving up control, right? They like
Yes.
things done a certain way, they like things done their way, a lot of times it creates anxiety for them when they are, you know, when they're not when they're not able to do things themselves, and so a lot of it can be around also doing some of that work to move towards being okay with things not being done exactly the way that you would do them, if it
Yeah.
means allowing that help and having somebody else step in to take something off of your plate. And so that is something that is incredibly common. I see it all the time. And I'm really glad that you mentioned it because if anybody knows that they are struggling with this, I just sort of want to point out that they're definitely not alone in that.
No, no, it took I've my therapist, like I said, was so helpful, and even the idea of going to therapy because I am in homes often with people who have postpartum depression, and one of the things that I have noticed, and I felt this the same way too, so I can really relate to it, is the sense of like, well, before I go to therapy, I have to pull myself up to a point where I'm not embarrassed to be in
Mhm,
therapy. And it
mhm.
doesn't work that way. Like, you kind of
Yeah.
have to be like, "This is really embarrassing. I'm going in like raw and vulnerable. And I never expected that I would feel this overwhelmed or this broken or this this needy, but I
Mhm.
am, you know?
Mhm.
And I think that it can be really hard to even reach out and accept and ask for help. I'm not sure where that comes from, but I know that it's very common.
Yes, no, absolutely. Well, and so I'm wondering, like, when you are working with moms, when you're working with, these women, what are some of the signs that you personally see physically or emotionally that sort of let you know that a mom is maybe having a harder time and she really needs more support, not necessarily more discipline for herself, but just really more
Yes.
support?
Yeah. Oh, I want to answer this question right, so I'm going to pause and think for just a moment.
Okay.
Okay, so at one point in my training, I learned about Maslow's triangle,
Mhm.
which is like this idea of self actualization.
Mhm.
Um, and that is kind of like the foundation when I'm working with a family. And, like obviously you want to see a mom glowing and happy and bonded and smiling and laughing and giggling and has energy to do things. And most moms are not, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
Some moms do. Some moms do, especially moms that have like this like abundance of support do.
Mhm.
Um, so Maslow's triangle, like basically like the very base is like your physiological needs. And I
Mhm.
feel like this is where so many moms get stuck in postpartum because like it does take 40 hours a week to feed a newborn, like
Mhm.
just feeding them. And so like when you're feeding a baby all the time, what are you sacrificing? Well, your sleep, your rest, your nutrition, your hydration. If you're fighting with your partner over these things, like is your environment safe? That's kind of like the like very foundational base that I think
Mhm.
someone who's a postpartum doula, like they're going to come cook for you. They're going to give you time to sleep. They're going to help you do the things that are conducive to recovery. And
Mhm.
then from there, you have like are you safe and secure? Are you like having this sense of love and belonging with your partnership, with your partner? A lot of times as we get to like those later postpartum shifts, like there's
Mhm.
more stability and there has been more rest because it's become normal to rest and to work together. Like I feel like these are skills families develop when they're working with somebody who's like, no, you have to sleep and is willing to say like you need to sleep
Mhm.
and when a mom's willing to say like, "Oh, I slept and I felt so much better and now I'm gonna
Mhm.
prioritize that," like, that's a great
Mhm.
thing. And then later, like, your last couple of visits, you're, like, sending them out for dates and they're having fun again and they're, like,
Mhm.
happy, like, that to me is, like, this huge milestone because pregnancy, birth, and the newborn era take a lot from people. And
Mhm.
then to add on top of that, like, is there space for hobbies? Is there space for fun? Is there like, you kinda have to work from the bottom up,
Mhm.
sometimes
Mhm.
because, like, if you're exhausted, going to Barnes& and Noble to read a book and get a coffee is not actually fun anymore, it's like,
Mhm.
I did
Mhm.
that, but it felt terrible because I felt terrible because I wasn't rested. So,
Mhm.
when I'm working with a family, that kind of, like, shapes, like, I
Well,
don't
I
know.
think no,
Yeah.
I think I understand what you're saying. So it sounds like if I'm understanding right, what you're referring to is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where basically, yeah, you imagine like a triangle, and there are these different needs that people have to meet. But before you can really focus on or try to address meeting certain needs, you have to first address the ones below that. And you start with like your most basic needs at the bottom, like you were talking about, like the needs in terms of like sleep and things like that. And then it's like once those are addressed, then you can start to introduce or focus on the next level up until you get to this point of, as you were talking about, self actualization. And so it sounds like, if I'm understanding right, this idea that you really kind of step in to help them to meet those basic needs first. So they're really taking care of themselves helping moms take care of themselves on the very most basic level. And then once they are more like once they're in a better spot, once they are managing those better and they're getting those needs addressed, then you help them sort of move on to the next thing. Did
Yeah.
I understand all that right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
think that we often deny that those basic needs are real needs,
Yeah.
know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I imagine also, in your work, you probably do a lot of advocacy. You talked before about informed choices. How
Yeah.
can moms apply that? How can moms, apply that mindset into their work, into their home lives? Like, what does that look like for you?
Ooh, you were making so many decisions as a new mom, and it's, like,
Mhm.
super overwhelming. Like, are you going to breastfeed? Are you going to pump? Are you going to bottle feed? Which bottle to use? How like, are you going to sleep train? Are you going to damage your baby forever because you decided to sleep train? You're not. But and how do you build a secure attachment when you're doing hard things?
Mhm.
Um Yeah, trying to make sure that people get as unbiased information as possible because I see people thrive no matter what choices they're making as long as they feel confident and supported in those choices. Right?
Mhm.
Like you can have a birth that's like a home birth with no interventions. You can choose a scheduled C-section. Both very valid good choices. You can breastfeed, you can pump, you can bottle feed, like you can formula feed all good choices for your baby. Like you're still feeding your baby. You gave birth, you grew a human. But I think that we're conditioned, or maybe not conditioned. I think it's easy to think of like, I'll give you an example of a mom I worked with earlier this year. She really wanted to breastfeed. It was super important to her. Her baby was super fussy. There was like constantly like a lot of blood in her baby's poop, like not a little bit, a lot. So she
Mhm.
worked with her pediatrician to see like, is this dairy? Is this gluten? Is this like, there was clearly some allergy. So she went on this very intense like elimination diet, which then very quickly was like altering her health and it did not fix any problems for her baby. So eventually the pediatrician just prescribed this very fancy, like very special formula that is made specifically for babies that are having issues, immediate change in the baby.
Mhm.
Although it wasn't an immediate change for mom, right? Because she was feeling guilty about like, yeah, but like I know that breastfeeding is good for my baby. I wanted to breastfeed. This was my plan. And so there has to be this chance of like, I think we really have to like grieve and um, honor those changes. She was also super amazing because at 6 months, she decided like she looked back and she was about ready to start work. She had this amazing maternity leave. And they were like, she was time to like, she was like, we have to sleep train. Like, we just have to. Um,
Mhm.
and she texted me, before I told you that example of the mom who was like, "My house is too messy, so I'm going to cancel." I was like, "No, this is literally my job." And she
Mhm.
texted me to cancel an appointment. She said, "I decided I'm going to visit my cousin in Japan for a week while my husband sleep trains the baby." She got on a plane and she literally left for a week. And she came back like literally so refreshed, so happy, and her baby like and I mean, that is an incredible dad as well. But, he took care of it, right? And there's an element of like, "Hey, we're in this together. I trust you." Like, also, like, "I can't watch my baby. Like, this is going to be too much for me, so I'm gonna go do something really healthy for me. You do the hard part because it's not gonna be hard for you." Um, Very cute. And then on their last visit, when I came, so they could do their, like, last little date night out together, like, I was trying to put the baby down. I put her down, and I was, like, patting her belly the way the dad does. The baby kept, like, trying to climb out of the crib, and I was like, "What am I doing wrong?" And so the mom came in and did the same thing. Baby's still, like, crying trying to crawl out of the crib. The dad's like, "I got this." And he comes in, he does the exact same thing we did. And she looks like, because we were watching on the monitor,
Uh-huh.
like, what is he gonna do differently? She looks up at him, takes a deep breath and sighed like, put her head down and fell asleep
Oh
within,
my
like, minutes. It was so
god.
cute and so, like, we worry about these things, like, if the baby's trying to crawl out of the crib, like, obviously she wanted to play with us because we both are like, that's what she's usually doing,
Yeah.
So I think when you can find safety in these choices that are maybe different than what you thought was the choice he would make, there's a lot of joy there, right? And
Yeah.
um, that it's okay to find safety in choices that, like, once you're in it and you see what the real needs of your family are, to like meet those needs and live that reality instead of trying to perpetuate some ideal that's not practical for your family.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and I know another thing that you have talked about before is how you really try to work with families to prioritize motherhood. You refer to it as motherhood flow,
Yeah,
along with prioritizing their career success. And I'm wondering if you could just briefly talk about, for starters, what does motherhood
yeah.
flow mean? Like, what does that mean to you when you are talking about it? And then how do you help moms to prioritize that, like, both of those things, that and career success?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, most of my moms are going back to work, after, some of them very quickly, some of them in months. I think, like, understanding, like, the reality of what is this going to take, so that I can because if you can really visualize, like, if I'm gone from my house for 9 hours and then I'm coming home to my baby, how do I want that time to be spent? Do you want that time to be spent washing bottles, or do you want that time to be spent, like, laughing and doing the bath and, like, if you can think about it and, like, what do you want to do, then you can set up your systems and your structures and hand off the tasks that, you know, um, might otherwise just fall to you by default. And I think
Mhm.
it's really important to learn how to hand things off. One thing that I learned when I was doing, in my class, uh, early in my business, I took a lot of different classes, and one of the teachers, the classes I took, her name was Melissa Cassera. She has a really great podcast too, about like financial life as
Mhm.
a woman, as women. That she taught this concept of like swirl, like how do you make your work pleasurable? And you should really focus on the things that are most pleasurable, and you need to always be asking yourself, is this good for me or not? And if not, you need to do something about it, right?
Mhm.
And I think that and when it comes to motherhood, like one of the families I worked with, um, oh, geez, early in the year this year, she, gave birth at the same time that she had graduated with her doctorate. And so for her to go into her next program, she, like, literally took no time off. She, like, gave
Mhm.
birth and the next week was starting her job. And so we talked about that. We're like, "Okay, like, what is important to you when it comes to feeding your baby?" And she was like, "I want him to have breast milk. That's really important to me." So we worked out like, okay, like, how are you going to be able to pump at work in this incredibly difficult, demanding thing? And she was able to talk with her boss, find her pumping breaks, get a ton of support around that from her work. She was like this pumping queen. She loved it. And then when we talked about like, okay, how are we going to use, like, you have all these postpartum hours. You're actually not even going to be home in the house when I'm doing these. Like the dad was the one, he had a little bit more leave. Again, great dad. And then he worked from home. So he did a lot of the childcare while he was talking. She was like, well, one of the things that's like my priorities is I really believe in nutrition. And I know that when I eat well, I feel better. And so I would literally, when I would come, me and their sweet little boy, like I'd put him in a little bouncer, I'd give him his bottle. And, some newborns you can't do this with because they're very
Mhm.
fussy. Her newborn was not fussy, so I could do this. But I would cook literally a week's worth of food for them and meal prep it in little containers so that she had her breakfast, lunch, dinner, and could just grab a couple snacks. And same for the dad. Like they were not figuring out their meals. And so then when they came home in the evening, they would do their bath time together and they had the things that they really valued as like this positive fun time, and they weren't being lost in all the tasks. Um, sometimes we can do that on our own through batch cooking. Sometimes it means hiring somebody to help with those things. But I think when you're thinking about like what is most important to me first, and then those things can bring you joy because even though they're work, it's like meaningful and purposeful work, not stuff that you just have to do. I
Mhm.
think there's a big difference in the feeling of work that is meaningful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I appreciate, you taking the time to talk about that and to explain that because again, this idea that we can't do everything, right? And so
Yeah.
how do you prioritize things? And to your point, what are the how do you really um think about the things that are especially important and make sure that you're fitting those in a way that feels good. So that yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to talk about that. So this has all been really wonderful. I really appreciate, you taking time out of your day. Before we kind of wrap up for the day, I'm wondering where if people want to learn more about you, if they want to learn more about the work that you do, where can they go to do that?
Yeah, I am on Instagram at shebirthsbravely. I also have a website, shebirthsbravely.com, that has recipes, and we have a first trimester checklist that's free that kind of sets you up with like, these are, you have this overwhelming amount of things to do. You get like an email every day that's like one little thing to check off your list. We have a great birth course. So I have a separate team that runs most of the course for me now, but yeah, it's so much fun. We have such a great community, and I love connecting with moms. So,
Okay, great.
yeah.
Well, thank you. And I will make sure to include all of that information in the show notes for anybody who is interested in checking that out. So before we do say goodbye for today, if you could leave the
Yeah.
listeners with one final message, one final piece of advice, what would it be?
You matter. It's not worth sacrificing your happiness and joy for everyone else. The studies show that the most successful kids have the happiest mothers. So you
Mhm.
have to think about your happiness and the amount that you're going to sacrifice. Obviously, parenting requires sacrifice, but you can't sacrifice your soul to do it.
Yes, no, absolutely. Well, thank you again so much. Thank you for being here. And as always, for the moms who are listening, if any of this resonates, if you found any of the things we talked about today to be helpful, to be valuable, please feel free to look Susie up. You can learn more about her. And then please just share this podcast with any other moms that could maybe use some additional support because we are all in this together.
Yes, we are.